Hello wonderful person, this is Anton and welcome to What the Math. This is going to be a video where I'm going to basically give you some tips on how to play Stellaris, and specifically here we're going to be talking about 15 most important tips that I've discovered so far that you may want to consider when you just start in the game. Let's start with tip number 1, and this is actually the most important tip when you just start. Take your science ships and go and survey everything. As a matter of fact, don't stop surveying even after you discover new races and have your empire established. Surveying is really important. It allows you to open up these different quests, different really cool anomalies that will give you special research events, and of course helps you discover new habitable planets to colonize. So once you begin the game, your science ships should actually be on constant patrol for new star systems. You should be really just going everywhere and surveying absolutely everything. It's actually very easy to do from the galaxy map. If you just click on a specific star system, you can tell your ship to survey everything. And it's best to put them in evasive mode so that they actually run away if they encounter something dangerous. Usually space monsters don't really care about them, but if you discover pirates, they may end up attacking the ship, so just run away. Tip number 2 is frontier outposts. These are actually very important for your early expansion, especially because you won't be able to create a lot of colonies right away, but you can create frontier outposts which basically kind of like stake a claim for this particular part of the galaxy for you. And even though it actually takes a few months for you to discover the colony ship technology, you can start staking claims right away as soon as you start the game. And to construct these, basically you take your construction ship and you click on a star in a specific system, and then you choose to construct a frontier outpost. These actually do cost a little bit of resources every month, but once you actually colonize that system, you can then deconstruct them and go and build one somewhere else where you want to stake your claim. And these are actually essential for your empire to grow fast, because without them you will end up just having your colonies, which will only create a very small part of the galaxy for you. Tip number 3 is in regards to colonies. So as soon as you start colonizing, focus on one colony at a time. These are actually very expensive and they do take time to develop. And you need to try to upgrade them as soon as possible, get to 5 population, and then upgrade to a new building that will finally start making some profit for you. And try not to overexert yourself and create too many colonies at once. And unfortunately for most of us, the limit to how many colonies we can have is going to be stuck at 5. And so you have to remember you want to choose the best possible planets, specifically the ones that appear green on your map. And then as soon as you establish a colony, just either transfer population or help them grow by upgrading them constantly. And once you reach 5 colonies maximum, what you can do is create a new sector. And so this is actually the next step. Learn how to properly manage your sectors. This is a very important part of the game where you essentially create a type of a puppet state that you don't control directly, but it will still give you a lot of resources and will still obviously help you with everything. But it does free up total controlled planets, letting you go on colonizing even more. And so once your empire starts to expand and once you find more planets to colonize, you want to create a sector somewhere in your controlled space and then relinquish control to the AI and focus on expanding your colonies instead. And without learning how to properly manage sectors, unfortunately you won't be able to create a very large empire, because there's technically a limit to how big your empire can be until you learn how to use sectors and also learn how to control the empires that you conquered. And tip number 5 is in regards to trade. So make sure you have trade going with as many empires as possible. Remember, you can always establish at least 3 embassies with 3 different races, and this number will go up with some research. But basically, once you establish an embassy, this will increase your relations with a certain race and allow you to trade and then possibly even create an alliance. But what you really are trying to get here is to get research trade going, because this will allow you to research things even faster. And you can also trade various resources, especially if you're actually short on one and have too much of the other. And also what you can do is, let's just say you have a limit to certain resources that basically just hit a cap and it doesn't grow anymore. So what you can do is you basically just go ahead and give one of the races some of those resources, because you're not really going to be able to increase it anymore. And what this will do is increase your relations with that particular species dramatically. So just make sure that you use trade a lot and trade with as many species as possible. And actually, in regards to the alliances, this is the next tip. Don't actually get into an alliance too fast, because what happens if you create an alliance is that you actually start losing 2 influence per month, and it's quite a lot actually. And it only disappears once you establish a federation, which is kind of difficult to do. So alliances are easy, but federations are hard. So unless you have a lot of influence coming in already, don't rush into an alliance with another species. And speaking of influence, it is very important. Make sure you always have at least +2 coming in, preferably even more than that, because it is actually, even though it's not technically a resource, it is very important. You use it for recruiting leaders, you're using it for various special events, you also use it to get generals and admirals in your game, and especially if you're playing as a kind of a military dictatorship or as a kind of an evil empire, you're not going to have a lot of influence coming in, so you may want to actually focus on getting as much of it as possible. Democracies, on the other hand, have plenty of influence, so if you're playing as a democracy, you may actually relax a little bit. But remember that special events and alliances and even things like frontier outposts will actually drain your influence quite fast, and you want to have at least 100 at all times. And let me explain to you why. This is actually the next tip. Sometimes the game will actually pull a random number generator thing on you, and a lot of your generals and a lot of your leaders just die. And if they die, it takes influence, and usually at least 50 influence, to recruit one. And so if you don't have at least 100, your research can actually suddenly stop because you won't have any scientists. Some of the planets might lose their leaders, so you won't be able to recruit anyone, and so those planets will suffer dramatically, start experiencing starvation, and people will actually might even die. So having at least 100 and preferably 200 influence at all times is actually kind of crucial. And this brings me to my next tip, which is really the focus of the early game is resource gathering and resource production. So don't try to go into war yet, don't try to go into diplomacy too much, but do focus on resource production so you have a kind of a foundation for your empire. Usually the recommended number is to have at least 10 energy credits and at least 30 mineral resources coming in every month, but this can obviously vary from person to person. Although when I play my games, I tend to have at least 20 energy credits coming in, although when I play my games, I do always run out of everything. So even if I have pluses in my energy credits and my mineral resources, something will happen. Maybe I'll have to upgrade my fleet, or maybe I'll start upgrading some of the buildings on the colony, and this will drain either energy or mineral resources really fast. So just make sure you always have your resources production in positives. And don't forget that you can always go back to your colony and upgrade certain buildings if you have a new research. So for example, if you suddenly uncovered a mining outpost of level 2, you can actually go on that colony and upgrade it, and even though you lose a little bit of energy, you will now produce a lot more minerals, and these are actually very efficient at creating a really powerful resource empire. And like I mentioned before, just try to have at least 200 of each for the rainy day when something doesn't go right for you. The next tip is in regards to military, and here you want to always have some sort of a fleet, and that's because if you don't actually have any fleet, the empires around you will know about it, you'll appear to them as a weakling, and they'll probably attack you. And this happened to me many times, and I didn't really know what's happening until I started building the fleet, and basically your military power determines if someone will attack you or not. And one of the best ways of preventing war from even starting is to actually always have the maximum capacity of your fleet. So even though this may actually drain your energy relatively fast, and by the way, you can actually decrease how much energy your fleet consumes, but what I really suggest is basically building up a large fleet, possibly even over the cap limit, and then just keeping them on a very low maintenance, which will allow you to actually have a lot of ships, and people will most likely be afraid of you, even though you technically are not that powerful. And it's really important for you to learn how to use Ship Designer early on, because you'll be using it a lot. So here's what usually happens. You find a new empire, you get into war with them, and you realize that they have weapons that may actually go through your armor, but they might not go through your shields as well, so you have to redesign your ships and give your ships more shields and less armor. Then you find out that they have a lot of shields, and you're using a lot of projectile weapons that don't actually damage shields that well. You may want to start using lasers or something else that destroys shields really quickly and will give you an advantage in battle. So you'll be doing this a lot with every empire you get into war with, and usually the best way to do this is to actually send a smaller fleet or send a scouting party, get into battle with one of the enemy fleets, then escape right away, retreat back to the base, and look at the battle review and see what kind of damage they cause to you and what kind of damage do you cause to them. And this way you'll be able to later determine what ships to recreate in Ship Designer. And this way, even a smaller fleet that you have may be able to defeat a larger enemy fleet, as long as you're basically kind of countering their weapons and using weapons that they don't really have a defense against. Now, next tip is in regards to research, and here, if you've already kind of figured out how it works, basically, every time the research is finished, you get these 3 random cards, although you can technically get a research that will give you more cards, and they'll be kind of randomly generated, but usually based on the kind of the government that you're playing with, and the kind of racial profile that you've selected. So, for example, if you're playing as a military race, you'll have more military cards. If you're playing as a peaceful race, you'll have more technology and more economic cards and so on. But once in a while, you'll get these purple cards, which are actually rare technologies, and it's highly recommended that you take them because, first of all, they're rare, they don't appear very often, and second of all, they'll give you bonuses that no one else may actually have. And some of these cards are actually absolutely brilliant, although some of them might not be as good for certain types of empires, but I still recommend just researching them because it will give you quite a boost, and it will also allow you to create unique weapons or unique designs, or possibly even unique buildings that no one else will have. And the next tip is about planets and colonies in general. So here you do want to specialize each planet, so don't try to spread them too much, especially if a planet is not really good for resources. You may want to focus it on research or something. So do specialize, so make one planet just for minerals and make one planet just for research. That way you'll actually be able to produce a lot more buildings related to that particular area, and it will basically increase your total production as well. And once a colony actually reaches the limit where you can't really upgrade anymore, or it basically is almost self-sufficient, I really highly suggest to add it to a new sector so that it basically runs itself, because you don't have to worry about it too much. But don't add planets that haven't really been making a lot of money or resources for you yet to a sector, because AI is not as good at managing planets as you are, and so it might actually be better to upgrade the planet first and then give it to a new sector so AI controls it for you. And also, as your colonies grow, and this is the next step, learn to move your population. This is actually one of the things you can do relatively easy in this game, and basically if a colony has reached the population limit but another colony somewhere else is actually still growing, you can kind of transfer them from one place to another, and depending on your policies, you may actually take a penalty or you may not take any penalty at all, but it does help your colonies grow much faster and gives you a little bit of control over how your colonies progress as well. And a few more specific tips, and one of the tips is that if you're playing as a democracy, you'll every once in a while you have elections, and this usually happens every 5 years, and when you have an election, there is something called a mandate each of the leaders will have, and you actually want to focus on it, because if you complete the mandate that the leader promised to focus on during his elections, you get a tremendous influence boost that you can then use to expand your colonies, or to give some of the other colonies a boost using the edict menu, and basically this will allow you to create a much more powerful empire a lot sooner. So don't ignore mandates, because they're actually very, very powerful. In regards to control, remember that the shift button actually cues your actions, so you may want to remember that when you're surveying different systems. You can actually take one science ship and shift cue all of the systems you want to survey, and do the same for your construction ship to construct various mines and research facilities around your empire, and this will allow you to free up some of your personal time to focus on something else. And lastly, remember, you can actually build certain buildings in any area you want, not just your empire, but actually anywhere. One of those buildings is a military station that basically protects your area somewhere. Although they do cost a little bit and they do take a while to construct, you can essentially construct it somewhere along your border, and those usually will be the first targets that the enemies will try to attack. And also wormhole generators, and this is of course if you're playing with a race that only uses wormholes to go between places. Wormhole generators can also be constructed anywhere, including inside enemy areas. So you can basically construct a wormhole generator and it will actually stay inside an enemy empire unless they destroy it later on. And you know what? I think that's all I wanted to teach you. This is all I've learned so far myself, and these are all pretty good tips to start in Stellaris and to try to learn more about this game. Now, if you've enjoyed these tips, let me know if there's anything else I haven't mentioned, and we're going to make another part where we'll talk about more specific details and more specific instructions on how to play this game better. Now, this is a very complex game, so it will take quite a long time to learn and to master, but it is an absolutely amazing game that Paradox Interactive has created and released, and it's definitely going to be quite a pleasure to play this for years to come. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you still haven't, like this video if you've enjoyed watching it, and share this with someone else who plays Stellaris and who likes to watch Stellaris videos, because there's going to be a lot more coming in the future. Game you later. Bye bye.